I never thought a late-night argument over pizza toppings would lead to a six-figure business. It started 2 years ago, in my crappy apartment in Pittsburgh. My roommate Jason and I were both working dead-end jobs. He was delivering for DoorDash. I was doing freelance graphic design that barely paid for rent and utilities. We just split a pizza and were arguing over pineapple. He loved it. I said it was culinary blasphemy. That devolved into a debate about weird food combos people actually love. And that's when the idea hit. What if we made a YouTube channel trying disgusting food combos people swear by? The idea sounded so stupid that it felt perfect. We shot our first video the next day with my cracked iPhone 8. Peanut butter pickle sandwiches. Why do people eat this? It was awful. The lighting sucked, the audio was echoey, and we both looked like we were halfway into a hangover. But people watched it. Not a ton, just a few hundred over the next week. But we got comments. People were weirdly passionate about their gross food combos. Some even asked us to try their favorites. We kept going. Every Sunday, we'd film a few episodes. I'd edit them at night, post one every Wednesday. We leaned hard into the theme. Disgust, drama, overreactions. Our thumbnail style got really clickbaity. Me gagging with a hot dog and chocolate sauce in my hand. Jason crying over a tuna and banana wrap. The titles were basically YouTube SEO bait. This cursed ramen combo might have killed Jason. After 6 months, we had 12,000 subscribers and were making about $300 a month. It wasn't much, but it paid for ingredients and takeout. More importantly, we had a weird little community that was growing. Then came the turning point. Spaghetti with strawberry syrup. Italy, forgive us. It went viral. Reddit picked it up. So did TikTok. Overnight, our channel jumped to 70,000 subs. That video alone made us $1,200 from AdSense. We freaked out. For the first time, this felt real. We got smarter. I spent nights reading YouTube analytics, SEO guides, retention tricks. Jason worked on merch ideas. He was really into meme culture and started designing stuff like shirts that said "Cursed Combo Survivor" with a crying pizza slice. 6 months later, we were making about $5K/month from a mix of ads, merch, and Patreon. We called the brand Mouth Crimes, and yes, the name stuck. We decided to quit our jobs. This was a huge gamble. Neither of us had savings. But we had momentum, and momentum is gold in content creation. We figured we had a 6-month window to make it work full-time or go broke trying. We committed to 3 videos a week, started a TikTok, and Jason came up with a genius idea, Mouth Crimes Roulette. Every episode, we'd spin a wheel with 20 cursed combos submitted by fans, and whatever it landed on, we had to eat live. Our viewership exploded. TikTok became our biggest funnel. One 15-second video of me dry heaving over a Pop-Tart stuffed with Spam got 3.5 million views in a week. Our YouTube shot past 200K subs. Brands started emailing. The first big sponsor was a hot sauce company. They offered us $2,000 for a single shout-out. Then a food delivery box brand gave us $5,000 for a mini-series where we'd recreate the worst combos sent by fans using only ingredients from their box. Jason's merch was killing it. He designed this hoodie with Mouth Crimes University on it, complete with a fake crest and Latin motto that said Mangiacare et Patty, eat and suffer. It became our best seller. We had fans sending us pics wearing it in grocery stores, classrooms, even weddings. Yes, really. By the end of year 2, Mouth Crimes had made $248,000 in gross revenue. Now, to be clear, we weren't rolling in cash. Between taxes, production equipment, ingredients, some of them weirdly expensive, and paying our editor once we hired one, we weren't buying Teslas. But we were both finally making consistent money. Around $6,000 each per month after expenses. More than we'd ever made before. Then came the big opportunity, and our first serious business disagreement. A large food brand, I won't say which, but think Dorito adjacent, wanted to buy a 51% stake in Mouth Crimes for $750,000. They wanted to take over merch, distribution, even build a product line of novelty snacks with our branding. Jason wanted to take the deal. He saw it as our golden ticket. I didn't. I was terrified of losing creative control. We'd built Mouth Crimes with our audience, on our terms. What would happen if our fans thought we sold out? It got ugly. We argued for days. At one point, he said he'd walk if I didn't agree. I said fine. We'd dissolve the partnership. Neither of us slept. In the end, we compromised. We rejected the deal, but agreed to build our own snack brand, without selling equity. That move nearly killed us. We knew nothing about food manufacturing, packaging, or logistics. Our first test batch of Mouth Crimes Mystery Mix, a trail mix with absurd combinations like gummy bears, wasabi peas, and cheese puffs, melted during shipping. One batch got moldy. We got roasted online. We refunded $6,000 in 1 week. But we stuck with it. Found a small batch snack company in Ohio to partner with. Rebranded the product as Viewer Vengeance Volume 1. Gave fans power to vote for ingredients each month. That worked. It's now our best revenue stream. We just released Volume 7 and sell out every time. So here we are, 2 years in. Jason and I co-own a company we started in a tiny apartment over a dumb pizza argument. We've hired a part-time editor, a customer support rep, and are working with a startup fulfillment center. We're not millionaires, but last month we crossed $34,000 in revenue. We're planning a live tour. Yes, people want to pay money to watch us gag on cursed food in real life. Sometimes I wake up and think, how the hell did we get here? But mostly, I think about how many dumb ideas I let go before this one, just because they sounded too stupid to work. Turns out, sometimes the stupidest idea is the one people didn't know they were dying for. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I was a kid, I thought I'd grow up, get a job at a nice company, maybe something with snacks in the break room, and work my way up. The plan was stability. My parents worked blue-collar jobs their entire lives, and all they wanted was for me to have a job where I didn't come home with grease on my clothes. And for a while, I followed that path. I graduated college with a business degree, landed a job in a mid-sized insurance firm, and settled into what I thought was a pretty decent life. Until I met Darren. Darren was my college roommate's older brother. He had dropped out of college after 2 years, started a niche e-commerce business selling high-end headphones, and now drove a Tesla and lived in a penthouse. We reconnected at a barbecue. I asked him about his business, expecting a smug response about luck or angel investors. But what I got instead was 3 hours of passionate talk about product sourcing, customer acquisition costs, and warehouse management. Something about that night messed with my head. I went back to my apartment and started reading. Dropshipping, Amazon FBA, SaaS startups, DTC brands. My LinkedIn feed turned into a TED Talk playlist. I wasn't unhappy at my job, but I realized I didn't feel anything. I just went through motions, punching keys, hitting targets, collecting paychecks. Safe, but dead inside. So I started small. Weekends and evenings, I'd flip stuff on eBay. At first it was just sneakers and limited edition merch. I made about $1, 302 months. It wasn't much, but it felt like mine. That feeling is addictive. Pretty soon, I was hitting flea markets, clearance aisles, liquidation auctions. Then I discovered something that changed everything. Laser engravers. I saw this guy on TikTok engraving names onto cutting boards and selling them as wedding gifts for $60 a pop. I thought, how hard could that be? So I did the math. A decent CO2 laser cost $1, 500. Boards cost $5 wholesale. I could design a Shopify site, run a few targeted Instagram ads, and sell them as custom anniversary gifts. I didn't tell anyone, not even my girlfriend. I called it Grain and Flame. Spent 3 weekends designing logos, setting up the store, learning how to not burn down my apartment with the laser. My first sale came from a college friend. I think she was just being supportive. But after I shipped it, she posted a story tagging my store, and it snowballed. In 2 months, I was doing $4K/month in revenue. I still had my day job, and now I was spending every night and weekend engraving cutting boards and gift boxes. I knew it wasn't scalable, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had created something that wasn't just a report for someone else's boss. Then the holidays hit. October, November, December. I was pulling in $18K/month. My apartment looked like a lumber yard. I started outsourcing designs to Fiverr freelancers and hired a 17-year-old neighbor to help pack boxes. We got a 1-star review because one board said "Happy 5th anniversary," and I cried in the bathroom. But we fixed it, sent a new one, and they changed it to 5 stars. I quit my job in January. Terrifying. Liberating. My dad thought I was having a quarter-life crisis. My mom told me to give it a year and then reapply to a real job. But I was in. I expanded the product line: charcuterie boards, coasters, pet memorial plaques. Anything sentimental that could be personalized. I reinvested every dollar into inventory, better machinery, and ads. I was learning marketing on the fly. A/B testing Facebook creatives at 2 a.m., split testing product pages over breakfast. By summer, I had to lease a 600 square feet workspace. Hired 2 part-timers from Craigslist. Still hand-packed every box. Still emailed every angry customer personally. My girlfriend broke up with me because I was married to the business. I didn't blame her. I missed 2 of her cousins' weddings because I was fulfilling a 400-unit wholesale order for a subscription box company. Then came the curveball. One of my TikToks went viral. Just me engraving a dog's name onto a cedar urn. 10 million views. Suddenly, we had 12,000 orders in 2 weeks. It was both the best and worst moment of my life. Our website crashed. I ran out of boxes. My supplier ghosted me. I didn't sleep more than 3 hours a night for 10 days. But somehow, we fulfilled them all. Not without scars. I had 2 employees quit, several refunds to process, and a $7K shipping bill that I hadn't budgeted for. But we survived. Revenue for the year hit $385,000. Profit was around $82K. Not bad for a solo founder with 0 outside funding and 1 very angry ex. Then came the acquisition email. It was from a larger home goods brand that specialized in personalized gifts. They wanted to partner, which turned into an offer to buy me out entirely. $650,000. All cash. I read the email 10 times. Took 2 days to respond. I didn't want to sell. This was my baby. But after 2 more meetings and some number crunching, I countered with $800K, including a 6-month consulting period. They accepted. I signed the papers in a WeWork with trembling hands. After taxes and bonuses to my last remaining part-time employee, shout out to Carol, 55, single mom, beast at logistics, I walked away with just under $590,000. I took a year off, traveled, started therapy. I hadn't realized how burned out I was, how much of my identity had become tied to productivity. But eventually, the itch returned. Not for cutting boards this time, but for building something again. Now I'm working on a SaaS tool for small product-based businesses like mine. It's a dashboard that combines order management, ad performance, inventory alerts, and email automation into one interface. It's bootstrapped, scrappy, and very much still under construction. But I've got 5 beta users, and one of them already told me they can't imagine going back to spreadsheets. I still don't call myself a CEO. Feels too fancy. But I guess I am an entrepreneur now. I never thought I'd be the type to start a business. Growing up, I was the play-it-safe kid. My parents were accountants. Risk, to them, was buying a used car instead of new. So naturally, I followed the path that made sense. College, major in finance, get a job at a respectable mid-sized firm, and spend my 20s inching up the ladder. By 27, I was making $85K, had a 401k, and a cat named Howard. Life was safe. Life was fine. Then the layoffs hit. Not just me, 30% of the company gone in a week. I walked out with a cardboard box of desk crap and a severance package that looked generous until I remembered rent in Chicago. I had savings, sure. But watching it slowly disappear with every passing month while I sent out resume after resume was the most humbling experience of my life. Out of boredom and desperation, if I'm being honest, I started freelancing. A friend of a friend needed help organizing their small business books. Nothing glamorous, just cleaning up their QuickBooks, sorting out invoices, setting up a basic budget. I charged $300 and felt guilty asking for it. But they were thrilled. Then they referred me to someone else. then another. And suddenly, I had 5 regular clients. Here's where things got interesting. One of those clients was a local coffee shop owner, Mia. She wasn't just running a shop. She was running 2, expanding fast, and drowning in the numbers. I started spending more time with her business, trying to untangle her vendor contracts, payroll systems, and inventory chaos. She once joked, "You're not just fixing my books, you're my business therapist." That stuck with me. A business therapist. I started to wonder if there was an actual gap here. Not just bookkeeping, but operational support for small business owners who couldn't afford a full-time CFO, but needed more than just a tax guy. I started talking to more small business owners, asking what they struggled with. Almost all of them said something like, "I'm good at what I do, but I have no idea how to run a business." So I leaned in. I built a very basic website, called myself a fractional CFO for small businesses, and made a Squarespace landing page. I didn't even know what SEO meant. I had 6 clients by then, mostly referrals, and charged around $500/month. I still felt like a fraud. Then I got my first cold inquiry. A bakery in Milwaukee found me through a blog post I wrote about managing cash flow for seasonal businesses. I'd written it on a Sunday afternoon just to feel productive. They reached out, we talked for an hour, and I quoted $750/month. They agreed instantly. That's when I realized I was undercharging by a lot. Over the next year, I stopped thinking of myself as just a freelancer. I had a real business. I gave it a name, Lodestone Ops, and formed an LLC. I hired a virtual assistant, then a junior analyst I found through Upwork. I learned to delegate, slowly. The hardest part was letting go of control. I'd spent so much time hustling solo that trusting someone else felt risky. But without it, I couldn't grow. By the end of year 2, we had 40 clients. Mostly small retail, restaurants, and service businesses. We weren't doing taxes or bookkeeping, we were the in-between. Helping them make sense of P/NLS, plan for growth, survive lean months, and negotiate better terms with suppliers. I realized we were becoming embedded in their lives. One client texted me on Thanksgiving because she didn't know whether to buy a new espresso machine or wait until January. I answered, "That's just how it was." Revenue hit $450K that year. I paid myself $90K and put the rest into hiring 2 more analysts and building an onboarding process. I stopped taking new clients personally and instead focused on training the team. We started creating standardized playbooks for different industries, bakeries, gyms, boutique retail, etc. Still custom work, but with a solid foundation to scale from. The 3rd year was brutal. I made a bad hire, someone who looked great on paper but tanked 2 client relationships with careless errors and missed meetings. I lost sleep over it, fired them after 3 months, and personally apologized to the clients. One stayed, one left. It was a gut punch. That's when I realized I needed better systems, not just good people. We started recording every process, from client onboarding to monthly reviews. It was annoying and tedious, but saved us later. Then COVID hit. You'd think we'd tank, but the opposite happened. Every client suddenly needed urgent help navigating PPP loans, renegotiating leases, and figuring out how to move online. We worked 12-hour days for weeks, became pseudo-consultants, and honestly, it bonded us with our clients in a weird way. We became essential. Clients told their friends. Our inbound doubled. By the end of 2021, we hit $1M in ARR. I took a modest salary bump and gave profit-sharing bonuses to the team. We were still lean, 8 of us total, but we were making a real difference. One of our gym clients went from nearly closing to expanding into a 2nd location. A florist we worked with paid off all her debt. I started sleeping better at night. Now, 5 years in, we've served over 300 businesses. We built a client dashboard system, a content hub, and offer workshops. We don't advertise. It's all word of mouth and organic search. I get emails weekly from people saying, "I didn't know a service like this existed." And honestly, 5 years ago, I didn't either. Looking back, it's surreal. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was just trying to pay rent. But it turned into this thing that's bigger than me. I still keep Howard the cat around. He's 14 now, still grumpy. I work fewer hours, spend more time mentoring my team, and recently started advising other founders on operations and scaling. It feels full circle. The biggest lesson? You don't need a billion-dollar idea. You need a real problem, a solution that actually helps, and the humility to keep learning. Also, charge more. Seriously, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. Not really. I was the type of guy who played it safe, got decent grades, went to a decent college, and took the first stable job offer I got out of school. I was an account manager for a mid-size IT services company. Nothing flashy, but the pay was okay, the work was tolerable, and I had health insurance. That was good enough for me. Until it wasn't. It started with the reorg. Our new VP of operations came in, and within 2 months, half the department was gone. They said it was streamlining. I got to keep my job. Lucky me, but the workload doubled overnight. The environment turned toxic fast. People stopped caring. Our once decent culture vanished, replaced with paranoia and finger-pointing. I held on for another year until I realized I hated logging in every morning. So I quit. No plan, no safety net. Just walked out. The next few weeks were a blur of Netflix, ramen, and panic. I started freelancing, web design mostly, since I'd picked up some front-end skills from projects over the years. The money was inconsistent, but I had time to think. I started noticing a pattern. Every client I worked with needed a website and basic branding, but they all struggled with digital tools, invoicing, CRM, analytics, even email campaigns. These were mostly solo consultants, small shop owners, independent lawyers, therapists, all of them drowning in admin. That's when the idea hit me. What if I build a simple, integrated platform just for these solo service providers? Something less bloated than Salesforce, but more comprehensive than Squarespace. A digital assistant for solo entrepreneurs. I called it Nestkit. I had no idea what I was doing. The first version was a Frankenstein of plugins and no-code tools glued together with Zapier. It looked awful. I gave free access to 5 of my former freelance clients just to test it out. 3 never logged in. One said it crashed her browser. The last one actually liked it and gave me a list of improvements. That person is still a paying customer today. Encouraged, I spent the next 6 months learning how to properly build a SaaS platform. I taught myself React and Firebase, designed a new UI, and recruited my old college roommate, now a back-end engineer, to help part-time. I offered him 5% equity because I couldn't afford to pay him yet. He agreed, mostly because he was bored at his FAANG job and liked the idea of building something real. Marketing was the next mountain. I posted in forums, wrote blog posts, tried cold email campaigns, all mostly ignored. But then I found a goldmine: Facebook groups. I joined dozens of groups for coaches, consultants, therapists, and solopreneurs. I didn't pitch. I just answered questions. Every day. For 3 months. People started noticing me. One group admin reached out and asked if I could do a live Q/ANDA about small business systems. That session led to 73 signups in a single week. Revenues started trickling in. $19/month subscriptions, a few $199/year annual plans. My Stripe dashboard became my new dopamine source. I hit $1,000 MRR in month 5. I celebrated by buying tacos from the fancy place down the block. Then came my first disaster. I woke up to 37 emails saying site down or error 500. Firebase had throttled us because of an API misconfiguration I hadn't noticed. We were making 30x more calls than allowed. My roommate patched it in 2 hours, but the damage was done. I lost 12 customers that day. That was the first time I cried over Nestkit. But I didn't quit. We fixed the issues, rebuilt parts of the back end, and added monitoring. I started hiring freelancers to handle customer support and UX design. Slowly, steadily, we grew. We passed $10K MRR at the 18-month mark. By then, my roommate was full-time, and we had a small team of 5, all remote, all scrappy. Then COVID hit. We braced for impact. I assumed churn would skyrocket. But the opposite happened. Thousands of people were laid off and decided to start solo businesses, coaches, online tutors, virtual assistants. Our target audience exploded overnight. In 6 months, our user base tripled. We struggled to keep up. I hired 3 support reps and 1 product manager in 30 days. We crossed $50K MRR in early 2022. That's when the VC emails started rolling in. At first, I ignored them. I wasn't sure if I wanted to raise. We were profitable, lean, and independent. But some of those VCs were persistent. One flew out to meet me in person. We talked for 3 hours over lunch. He didn't push. He just asked about my vision. That night, I made a decision. If I was going to take funding, it had to be for growth, not survival. I negotiated a $2.5 million seed round at a $15 million valuation with full control over product direction and hiring. We used that money to double the team, revamp the onboarding experience, and launch an AI assistant feature. That AI assistant changed everything. It could draft invoices, summarize client meetings, suggest marketing content, all personalized. Usage spiked. Churn dropped. We hit $100K MRR just 10 months after launch. I was invited to speak at a SaaS Founders Summit in Austin. I stood on that stage and told the story of how a burnt-out account manager with no plan ended up building a startup that now supported 40,000 solo entrepreneurs. Afterward, a kid maybe 22 years old came up to me, shaking, and said, "I've been trying to build something like yours for 6 months. Everyone keeps telling me it's too niche." I told him what I now believe more than anything. There's no such thing as too niche. There's just not enough patience. Today, NestKit has 70 employees, over $10 million in ARR, and offices in 2 countries. But the thing I'm most proud of? That original customer, the one who stuck with us even when the site crashed, she now runs a 6-figure coaching business entirely on our platform. She emailed me last month to say NestKit changed her life. I printed that email and framed it above my desk. Turns out, I was an entrepreneur all along. I just needed the right kind of pain to wake me up. I was 29 when I finally accepted that my startup wasn't a startup anymore. It was a very expensive hobby. I'd been working on it for 3 years. 3 long, humiliating years. The idea was actually pretty solid, at least in theory. I wanted to create a platform that helped small landlords manage their rental properties, scheduling repairs, automating rent collection, flagging lease deadlines. I'd been a property manager before, so I knew the pain points. I thought I had insight. I even managed to pull together a prototype with a friend from college who coded on the side. We called it LeaseFlow. We built fast, launched even faster. Got a few early users through Reddit and Facebook groups. I thought it was happening. The dream. Quit my job money. TechCrunch article money. But we plateaued almost immediately after launch. By year 2, we had 200 users. By year 3, we had 210. I kept burning savings. My co-founder dipped out in year 2 after landing a full-time job. I couldn't blame him. We were making no money. Our best month ever was $290 in revenue. But I kept pushing. I kept telling myself I was one tweak away, one marketing push away, one partnership away. I pitched to VCs and angel investors. No one bid. The one guy who looked interested told me, "It's not a real business, man. It's a feature." I wanted to punch him. But he was right. I started driving Uber and delivering groceries to cover rent. I told my parents I was in between funding rounds. They nodded like they believed me, but I saw it in their eyes. They were worried. My girlfriend was too. She never said it outright, but the vibe shifted. Less excitement about my founder journey. More, "Have you thought about maybe going back to work?" It all came to a head one day when I realized I had $700 left in my account and my AWS bill was $240. I remember staring at my laptop in a cafe, just empty. No rage, no panic. Just tired. It felt like I'd been climbing a hill that only got steeper the more I climbed. I went home, shut the laptop, and didn't touch it for a week. I slept. I saw friends I ghosted. I didn't check Slack. It was like quitting without officially quitting. Then something weird happened. A guy I barely knew, he'd worked at a property management company I cold emailed years ago, DM'd me on LinkedIn. He said, "Hey, do you still have access to LeaseFlow? I might have a client for you." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the timing felt absurd. I told him the site was technically still live, but I wasn't supporting it. He replied, "If I paid you, would you?" I needed money, so I said yes. We got on a Zoom call. He ran a small firm that managed 80 units in the Midwest. He said my product did 70% of what they needed, and the other 30% he'd happily pay for if I could build it. It was the first time anyone framed it that way. "I'll pay if you build it." We agreed on a modest fee $500 a month and a list of features. I dusted off the code base. It was messy. My old co-founder had used Firebase in a way I barely understood, but I figured it out. Took me 2 weeks, and he was thrilled. Then he referred me to someone else. 2 months later, I had 4 clients. Small shops. Not VC scale, but steady. I added custom dashboards, late fee triggers, tenant portals. It felt like freelancing, but better. I wasn't just writing code. I was building something people actually used and paid for. I rebranded as Flow Property and moved away from the startup mindset. No more growth hacks or viral launches. Just one client at a time. Word spread slowly. I raised my price. By the end of the year, I had 14 paying clients and was making just over $5,000/month. That's not retire to Bali money, but it covered rent, groceries, and health insurance. For the first time in years, I felt okay. I hired a contractor to help with support, then another to improve the UI. We weren't a team, not really, but I wasn't alone anymore. 2 years later, we crossed $20K MRR. I never raised a cent. I never got written up in TechCrunch, but I had 40-plus clients, most of them mom-and-pop property managers who just wanted software that didn't suck. One day, I got an email from a guy at a mid-sized PropTech company. He said he liked what I'd built. Asked if I'd ever considered strategic acquisition. I had, but not seriously. I replied, happy to talk. We negotiated for 3 months. It wasn't a unicorn exit. But when the wire hit, just north of $1.2 million, I cried. Like, ugly cried. I called my parents. I called my old co-founder and gave him a slice. He didn't expect it. He cried too. I took a break. Toured Japan. Learned how to make ramen from scratch. I still haven't gone back to full-time work. Don't know if I will. But here's the thing. I'm not special. I just held on a little longer. Long enough to turn a dead startup into a real business. And then I let it go. Not every business has to change the world. Some just need to pay the bills and maybe change your life along the way. I've always believed that the road to success is not a straight line. It's more like a winding trail, full of twists and turns, unexpected obstacles, and surprising breakthroughs. The key is to keep walking, even when the path gets difficult. This is my story of how I went from a broke college graduate to building a 6-figure business in just 3 years. It all started back in 2017 when I graduated from college with a degree in business management. To be honest, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I had dreams of starting a business, but I had no real plan or guidance. All I knew was that I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job for someone else. I wanted to create something of my own, but I had no idea where to start. I moved back in with my parents after graduation, which, in hindsight, was both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, I didn't have to worry about rent, and it gave me a chance to save up money. On the other hand, it made me feel like I wasn't progressing. All my friends were getting jobs, buying cars, and renting apartments, while I was living in my old bedroom, feeling like a failure. The first few months after graduation were rough. I applied to dozens of jobs, but I kept getting rejected. My college degree didn't seem to impress anyone, and I had no real work experience to back it up. I spent my days trying to figure out what to do next. It was frustrating, to say the least. I didn't want to give up on my dream of entrepreneurship, though. So, I started reading books, listening to podcasts, and watching YouTube videos about business. I wanted to learn everything I could about starting a company, even if I didn't know exactly what kind of company I wanted to start. One day, I stumbled upon an online course about dropshipping. I had heard of it before, but I never really understood how it worked. After watching a few videos, I became hooked. Dropshipping was a business model where you could sell products online without having to hold any inventory. Essentially, you partner with a supplier who ships the products directly to your customers. It sounded too good to be true, but it also seemed like an opportunity one could take advantage of. I spent the next few weeks diving deep into the world of e-commerce. I researched the best platforms to use, the products that were trending, and how to create a brand. I decided to try my hand at selling phone accessories because it seemed like a niche that had high demand but wasn't overly saturated. I created a Shopify store and started setting everything up. I spent hours designing the website, selecting products, and writing product descriptions. I was doing everything myself. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was determined to make it work. After launching my store, I ran some Facebook ads to drive traffic. To my surprise, the ads actually worked. I started getting sales. Not a lot, but enough to make me think that this could actually become something. I remember the first sale I ever made. It was a $25 phone case. I was ecstatic. It wasn't much, but it was proof that my idea could work. But as quickly as the sales came, they also disappeared. For every 10 people who visited my site, only one would actually buy something. I had no idea how to optimize my ads or how to convert visitors into paying customers. I was losing money on every sale, and it felt like a never-ending cycle of failure. I spent the next few months tweaking my website, refining my ads, and experimenting with different strategies. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. I started getting more traffic, and my conversion rate went up. By the end of the first year, I had made a few $1,000s in profit, which, while small, was a huge victory for me. But I knew I needed to scale if I wanted to turn this into a real business. I started reinvesting all my profits back into the business. I hired a freelance graphic designer to create better ads and a content creator to manage my social media accounts. I also started using email marketing to re-engage customers and encourage repeat purchases. As the business grew, I realized that my time was becoming more valuable than ever. I couldn't keep doing everything myself if I wanted to scale. So, I hired a virtual assistant to handle customer service and a few other tasks. This freed up my time to focus on the bigger picture, growing my brand and improving my marketing efforts. By the time 2019 rolled around, my dropshipping business was generating enough revenue that I could quit my part-time job. I was officially a full-time entrepreneur. It felt surreal. I remember the moment I handed in my resignation letter. I had been working that part-time job for over a year, and it had been draining me both physically and mentally. But now, I was in control of my own destiny. The next year was all about scaling. I started testing new products, expanding into new niches, and growing my customer base. The more I focused on improving my business, the more success I experienced. By the end of 2020, my revenue had reached 6 figures. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. I faced plenty of challenges along the way. There were times when I wanted to give up, when things seemed too difficult or overwhelming. But I kept pushing forward. I had learned that success doesn't come overnight, and that failure is part of the journey. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From a broke college grad to running a successful 6-figure business, it feels like a dream come true. But I know that the journey is far from over. There's always something new to learn, new strategies to try, and new obstacles to overcome. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm a lot closer than I was yesterday. The one thing I've learned through all of this is that the key to entrepreneurship is perseverance. You will fail, you will struggle, and you will doubt yourself. But if you keep pushing, keep learning, and keep growing, you'll find success. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. I'm proof of that. A few years ago, I decided to leave my comfortable corporate job to chase something that felt much riskier and uncertain. I had been working in marketing for a large tech firm, making decent money, but my heart wasn't in it. The idea of spending my life climbing a corporate ladder that didn't excite me seemed pointless. I wanted something more: freedom, creativity, and the chance to build something from the ground up. So, with a mix of nervous energy and optimism, I took the plunge and quit my job to start my own business. My journey began in a small town in the Midwest where I grew up. It wasn't exactly a hub for startups or innovation, but it was home. After doing some research, I decided I was going to open a local coffee shop. I had always been obsessed with coffee culture, and there was an untapped market in my town. The coffee shop would be different, though. It wouldn't just be a place to grab a cup of joe. I envisioned it as a community hub, a spot where locals could gather, work, relax, and most importantly, connect with each other. At first, the idea seemed simple enough. I'd need to secure a location, fund the startup costs, and create an atmosphere that would draw people in. The funding part was probably the hardest. I had a bit of savings from my corporate job, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. So, I went to a few banks, pitched my idea, and got rejected. I was told that the coffee shop market was oversaturated and that my small town didn't have enough foot traffic to make it profitable. But I wasn't ready to give up. I began exploring alternative funding options and stumbled upon crowdfunding. I created a campaign on Kickstarter and pitched my idea to the world. To my surprise, people actually believed in it. In less than a month, I raised more than enough money to cover the initial expenses. The next big hurdle was finding a location. I spent weeks driving around town, looking for empty storefronts. Everything seemed either too rundown or too expensive. But one day, I came across a charming, old building on the corner of Main Street. It was a bit worn, but it had character, and more importantly, it was in the perfect spot. I immediately called the landlord, negotiated a deal, and signed the lease. With the location secured, I started to feel a sense of excitement and fear all at once. This was real. I began working on the design and layout of the space. I wanted the coffee shop to feel warm, welcoming, and artistic. I hired a local carpenter to build custom furniture and a barista station, and I worked with an interior designer to create a vibe that was rustic but modern. I knew that ambience was key to attracting customers. It wasn't just about selling coffee. It was about creating an experience. But as the opening day approached, I realized I hadn't thought about one thing: hiring. I had no idea how to find good employees, and with minimal experience in managing a team, I was completely out of my depth. I put out job listings online, but it wasn't easy to find reliable people who were passionate about coffee and customer service. I interviewed dozens of candidates, most of whom either didn't show up for interviews or just didn't fit the vibe I was going for. After a lot of trial and error, I finally found a team of 3 who seemed to click with my vision. The first few weeks were rough. The staff was still getting used to the rhythm of the shop, and I had to step in to handle just about everything. I worked 12-hour days, making coffee, managing inventory, cleaning, and trying to build a customer base. I wasn't making any money. In fact, I was losing money every day. I had a few loyal customers who kept coming back, but it was clear that I wasn't reaching enough people. That's when I had an idea. I needed to use my marketing skills. I had spent years working in digital marketing for a large company, so I knew how to run campaigns and create buzz. But this time, I had to do it all on my own with a shoestring budget. I started by creating social media pages for the coffee shop, posting daily updates about our offerings, the local artists we were supporting, and the events we were hosting. I ran a few targeted ads, but mostly I relied on organic growth. I also reached out to local influencers and bloggers, offering them free drinks in exchange for reviews. Slowly but surely, people started talking about the shop. One of the best decisions I made early on was to host events. I partnered with local musicians to put on live music nights and invited local artists to display their work on the walls. I started hosting weekly trivia nights, and soon, the coffee shop became the place to be. The word of mouth grew stronger, and we started getting a steady flow of customers. As the months went on, things started to improve. We were breaking even and even making a little profit. The shop became a local hangout spot, and I began to see regulars who would come in every morning for their cup of coffee. The community felt like it was rallying around my dream. That was the moment when I knew it was all worth it. All the sleepless nights, the doubts, the fear, it was all paying off. But just as things were starting to go well, a major setback hit. The town was hit with a flood, and my shop was one of the hardest hit areas. The basement where we kept our storage and equipment was completely flooded, and we lost everything. The furniture, the equipment, the inventory. I thought for a moment that it was the end of the road, but I refused to give up. I called in a cleanup crew and started the restoration process. I worked with my team, cleaning out the mess and getting the place ready to reopen. We were closed for only 2 weeks, and when we reopened, the support from the community was overwhelming. People came in droves to support us. They bought coffee, donated money, and volunteered to help clean. It felt like the entire town was behind me, and it was an incredibly humbling experience. Since that flood, things have only gotten better. We expanded the menu, started selling our coffee beans online, and even opened a second location in a nearby town. Today, my coffee shop is thriving, and I can honestly say I've never been happier. The journey has been tough, full of ups and downs, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. I've learned more about business, perseverance, and myself than I ever could have imagined. And the best part? I get to do what I love every single day. To anyone out there thinking about making the leap into entrepreneurship, I say go for it. The road may be hard, but the reward is worth it. I grew up in a small town where the biggest ambition anyone had was to work at the local factory or become a teacher. It wasn't a bad life by any means, but there were no high expectations, and there was definitely no one around who talked about making it big. So when I started to develop an interest in business, everyone thought I was a little odd. But I was always the kind of kid who couldn't stand the idea of just going through the motions. I wanted something more, something that would let me be in charge of my own life. And that dream started with a single idea, sparked by a simple frustration. I was 23, freshly out of college, and working a 9 to 5 in an office job I hated. The commute was long, the work was monotonous, and the office politics were draining. But one day, I had an epiphany. I was trying to get some work done on my laptop at a coffee shop, and it was impossible to find a table that wasn't taken. Every single seat was occupied by people plugged into their laptops, just like me, while trying to get their work done. As I sat there, I realized that every time I visited a coffee shop, there was never enough space for everyone. I thought, why not create a space that was built for remote workers, where people could actually book desks in advance and have a productive environment without worrying about finding a seat? That was the beginning of what would become my first business, a co-working space. At first, I didn't know the first thing about running a business, let alone starting one. But I did know that I hated my current job, and I couldn't keep doing it if I wanted to pursue this dream. So, I made the leap and quit. The decision was terrifying. I had a small savings cushion, but I knew it wouldn't last long. I didn't have any investors or a network of wealthy family members who could bankroll me. It was just me and my laptop. I started by researching everything I could about co-working spaces. I read books, watched webinars, listened to podcasts, and even visited other spaces to see what they were doing right and what they could do better. I learned about lease agreements, the importance of community, and the logistics of setting up an office for a shared workspace. The more I learned, the more I realized just how much work it was going to take. It wasn't just about finding a location and renting out desks. It was about creating a culture, offering value to customers, and building relationships. But even with all this knowledge, the next step was the most daunting: finding a location. I didn't want to commit to something too big or too expensive in case it didn't work out, but I also didn't want to aim too low. I spent months searching for the right place, finally landing on a modest storefront that had just enough space for 10 desks and a couple of meeting rooms. It wasn't much, but I figured it would be a good starting point. The next hurdle was marketing. How would I convince people to sign up for a membership when I didn't have any clients yet? I didn't have a brand, and I didn't have any kind of reputation in the industry. My strategy was simple: hustle. I used every platform available to me. I started by offering discounts to early adopters who would help spread the word. I also networked relentlessly, going to every event I could find and meeting people in the freelance and entrepreneurial communities. I built relationships with local coffee shops, gyms, and cafes to offer reciprocal discounts, hoping to create a strong local network that would send people my way. It took a lot longer than I expected to get those first few signups. There were many nights when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But slowly, bit by bit, things started to click. People began to sign up for monthly memberships, then others came for short-term projects. Some just wanted a quiet place to focus for a few hours. Others wanted to attend networking events and collaborate on their ventures. What really made the difference was the sense of community I created. I wasn't just offering desks and Wi-Fi. I was offering a place where people could share ideas, collaborate, and learn from one another. Word started to spread that this wasn't just a workspace. It was a hub for people who wanted to build something bigger than themselves. That's when the magic started to happen. As the space began to grow, I had to make some tough decisions. I was running on fumes, both mentally and financially, trying to juggle the demands of growing the business and maintaining a life outside of work. I had to hire my first employees, community managers who would handle day-to-day operations, from booking desks to managing events. I was lucky to find a couple of people who were as passionate about the project as I was. It was a struggle to pay them at first, but they believed in the vision enough to stick around through the early days. Eventually, after a year, the co-working space was becoming profitable. I expanded the space, added more desks, more meeting rooms, and even started offering virtual office services for people who needed a business address but didn't want to rent physical office space. I also realized that running a co-working space wasn't just about space. It was about the value you added to people's lives. I started offering workshops, seminars, and networking events that focused on entrepreneurship, marketing, and technology, all of which attracted a wide range of people. Over time, I grew the business from a single location to 3. I started building a small team of operations managers and marketing professionals who could help me scale. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were months where revenue was slow, and I had to dip into my savings just to make payroll. There were times when I had to let go of employees who weren't the right fit, and times when my mental health suffered from the constant pressure. However, the drive to keep going was stronger than ever. I had created something that was truly mine, and the impact it had on people's lives kept me motivated. I saw freelancers getting their first big clients, entrepreneurs launching startups, and small businesses expanding because they had the right environment and support. I had built a community that made work feel less like a chore and more like a place to grow. Looking back, there were so many times when I thought I was going to fail. But every time I hit a wall, I found a way over it. I didn't have any secret formula. just persistence, resilience, and the ability to learn from mistakes. Today, my co-working business is thriving. It's far from easy, but it's something I'm incredibly proud of. I'm now looking into opening more locations, and I've started investing in other businesses that align with my values. The moral of my story? If you're willing to take risks, learn constantly, and surround yourself with the right people, you can turn even the smallest idea into something huge. It's not going to happen overnight, and you'll face plenty of setbacks. But if you keep pushing forward, you'll build something that's worth every ounce of sweat and every sleepless night. Just keep going. Failure is only temporary, but success is the result of persistence. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life, and my story is one of constant learning, failure, and surprising success. I'd like to share how I went from a broke college student to a successful founder of a company that eventually sold for 7 figures. The journey wasn't a straight line, and it had more than its fair share of bumps, but the lessons I learned along the way are things I'll never forget. It all started in my freshman year of college when I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was studying engineering because that's what my parents thought was the safe path, but I always felt like there was something more. I started experimenting with different side gigs to make money. At first, it was small stuff, selling used textbooks, flipping cheap electronics on eBay, even tutoring. None of these were particularly groundbreaking, but they gave me a taste of what it felt like to make money on my own terms. One day, while browsing Reddit, I saw a thread about dropshipping. I had heard of it before, but never really understood how it worked. After a few days of research, I decided to give it a shot. I started a small store selling phone accessories. The store looked amateur at best, but I spent hours every day learning how to market it. The first month was a disaster. I barely made any sales, and I spent more on ads than I made in revenue. But I didn't give up. I kept optimizing, tweaking my ads, adjusting product listings, and trying new marketing strategies. Around the 3-month mark, something clicked. I don't know if it was the right combination of Facebook ads or the product finally hitting the right niche, but sales started coming in. At the peak of that first store, I was doing around $10,000 per month in sales. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was the first time I truly felt the power of entrepreneurship. But as often happens in the world of e-commerce, my success didn't last. My competitors started copying my products, and my Facebook ads became increasingly expensive. My profit margins shrank, and I started losing money. I had to pivot. The only thing that kept me going during that time was the belief that I could make it work if I kept adapting. Instead of shutting down my business, I decided to completely change my strategy. I started focusing on creating my own products. This was a massive gamble for me because it meant I would need to invest money into product development, manufacturing, and shipping, things I had zero experience with. But I knew that selling other people's products would only take me so far. I wanted to build something of my own. I spent months designing and prototyping products, learning everything I could about sourcing, manufacturing, and shipping. Eventually, I launched my own line of phone accessories. It wasn't just about selling a case or a charger. I wanted to create a brand. I hired a photographer to take high-quality pictures of my products, created a website that looked professional and not like a 12-year-old had made it, and focused on building a community around my brand. At first, it was a struggle. My sales were slow, and I found myself doubting my decision every week. But I kept pushing. I used social media to engage with my audience, even if it was just a few followers at first. I created giveaways, partnered with influencers, and ran targeted ads. Slowly but surely, the brand started gaining traction. It wasn't an overnight success, and it didn't come without its setbacks. There were production delays, shipping issues, and times when I thought I might have to shut the whole thing down. But every time I hit a wall, I learned something new. I figured out how to negotiate better terms with suppliers, how to streamline my fulfillment process, and how to scale up without compromising the quality of my products. Then, after about 2 years of grinding, things started to take off. My sales went from $10,000 a month to $50,000, and then to $100,000. I hired a small team, mostly remote workers who handled customer service, fulfillment, and marketing. My company was finally starting to run like a well-oiled machine. By this point, I had learned to trust my instincts, delegate responsibilities, and focus on the big picture. But as much as I loved running my business, I began to realize that I was getting burnt out. The stress of constantly being on call, managing employees, and dealing with customer complaints was taking its toll. After consulting with a few mentors, I started thinking about an exit strategy. I had built something that was profitable and growing, and it seemed like the right time to move on to the next chapter. I began reaching out to potential buyers, and to my surprise, several companies were interested. After a few rounds of negotiations, I sold my company for 7 figures. The deal included not only the intellectual property and brand, but also the inventory and manufacturing rights. The feeling when the sale went through was surreal. I had built something from nothing, and now it was paying off in a huge way. Looking back, the journey wasn't easy. There were so many moments when I felt like giving up, and so many times when it seemed like nothing was working. But the key was persistence. I learned how to adapt, how to pivot, and how to embrace failure as part of the process. I learned that success is rarely a straight path, and that setbacks are just part of the game. After selling my business, I took some time off to recharge. I traveled, spent time with family, and reflected on the experience. Now, I'm in the process of starting something new. I've learned a lot since my dropshipping days, and I'm excited to apply those lessons to the next venture. For anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Don't give up. You will face obstacles, and things will get hard. But if you keep pushing, keep learning, and keep iterating, you'll find a way to make it work. The road to success is never easy, but it's always worth it in the end. I still remember the day I decided to quit my 9-to-5 job. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was sitting at my desk, staring blankly at the screen. The clock was ticking, and I knew the end of the workday was approaching, but my mind was elsewhere. I had been working in a corporate job for nearly 5 years, climbing the ladder, earning promotions, and receiving a nice paycheck. On paper, it was the kind of job people dream about. Yet, inside, I was burning out. I felt like I was losing myself to a system that didn't care about who I was as a person, just what I could deliver for the company. It wasn't that I hated the people I worked with. In fact, I made some lifelong friends there. It wasn't even that the work itself was inherently bad. It was the lack of control, the constant feeling that I was just a cog in a machine. I had big ideas, dreams of building something meaningful, something that aligned with my passions. But every time I tried to talk about them with my colleagues, I was met with polite smiles and comments like, "That's a nice dream, but it's not realistic." A few months before, I had stumbled upon a small niche in the market during one of my late-night online shopping sessions. It was a product that I couldn't find anywhere else, something I felt could solve a problem for a lot of people, something I was personally frustrated by. I took a mental note of it, not thinking much of it at first. But over time, that idea festered in my mind. What if I could create this product myself? What if I could take control of my future and turn this idea into something real? I was terrified. I had no experience in manufacturing, no background in e-commerce, and no clue about the logistics behind starting a business. But the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this was something I had to try. The idea for my first product was simple: a sustainable, eco-friendly alternative to single-use plastic products that were both functional and stylish. I started researching relentlessly, reading everything I could about the industry, the market, the competition, and the supply chain. I spent late nights watching YouTube tutorials about creating a business plan, setting up websites, and handling inventory. I felt overwhelmed at times, but there was this underlying excitement that I couldn't shake off. I decided to take the plunge. I saved up a little bit of money, enough to cover my initial investment, and started designing my product. I worked with a local designer to create the first prototype, a sleek, minimalist product that was exactly what I had envisioned. Once the design was finalized, I found a manufacturer overseas who could produce it in bulk. I negotiated the best deal I could, considering my limited budget, and placed my first order. Then came the hardest part: launching. I had no social media following, no online presence, and honestly, no idea how to market my product. I started an Instagram account, a basic website, and an online store. I crafted posts, took photos of the product in different settings, and tried to build hype. Every time I posted something, I felt like I was shouting into the void. I had no idea if anyone was actually seeing my content, let alone if they would be interested in buying. But then, something amazing happened. A few weeks after I launched, I got my first order. It was from someone I didn't know. It was an exhilarating feeling. Someone actually bought my product. I couldn't believe it. My phone pinged with the notification, and I remember pacing around my living room, grinning like a maniac. I took a screenshot of the order and sent it to my family and close friends. It was the moment I realized this dream could actually become a reality. From there, the momentum started to build. Slowly but surely, I began to make more sales. My product was getting good reviews, and word of mouth began to work in my favor. People were tagging their friends on social media, sharing photos of the product, and helping me spread the word. Still, it was a grind. Every day was filled with packing orders, managing customer service, dealing with inventory, and trying to figure out how to grow my brand. There were days when I felt like giving up. The stress was unbearable at times, and I often doubted myself. I had moments where I felt like I was doing everything wrong, where I wasn't reaching enough people, or where I made a mistake that cost me more than I could afford. But I kept pushing forward. Every mistake was a lesson learned. Every setback a chance to pivot and improve. Fast forward 2 years, and things had started to take off. My brand had gained a loyal following, and my product was selling faster than I could restock. I had expanded my offerings to include several variations of the original product and was now working with a team of freelancers who helped with design, marketing, and logistics. What had started as a side hustle while working a full-time job had turned into a business that was generating enough revenue for me to quit my job and focus on it full-time. Quitting my job was a scary decision, but I knew it was the right one. I was no longer living for the weekends or the next vacation. I was living for the work I was doing every day, knowing that I was building something meaningful that would have a lasting impact. I had the freedom to create, to innovate, and to shape my own future. Now, years later, I look back on that journey with a mix of pride and humility. There were plenty of sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and tough decisions. But every step along the way has been worth it. I've learned things I never could have imagined, and I've gained confidence in my ability to tackle challenges head-on. My company is no longer just a small startup. It's a growing brand that's made a name for itself in the market. There are still challenges, of course. The market is competitive, and I'm constantly having to innovate and stay ahead of the curve. But the difference now is that I'm doing something I love, something that aligns with my values. It's no longer just about making money. It's about creating something that's bigger than me. Looking back, I can't help but think about how far I've come. I started with nothing but an idea and a whole lot of uncertainty, but I took a chance on myself. I kept going, even when the road was tough, because I believed in the possibility of something bigger. And now, I'm living proof that with enough perseverance, creativity, and a little bit of risk, you can build something amazing from the ground up. The one thing I would tell anyone thinking about taking the leap is this. It's not going to be easy, but it will be worth it. Don't let the fear of failure stop you from pursuing your dreams. You have no idea what you're capable of until you try. If you're passionate about something, go for it. You might not get everything right the first time, but you'll learn, adapt, and keep moving forward. And that, in the end, is what entrepreneurship is all about. Building something out of nothing and making it your own. I still pinch myself every day, realizing that I'm now doing exactly what I dreamed of years ago. And I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. Let me tell you about my journey from a broke college dropout to becoming the owner of a successful online business, and all the ups and downs in between. It wasn't easy, but it was worth every single failure. My story is a reminder that sometimes the hardest times in life can lead to the most rewarding outcomes if you're willing to put in the work. It all started back in 2014. I was a sophomore at a state university, majoring in computer science. I had always been fascinated by tech, and I imagined myself one day working for one of the big players in the industry, Google, Apple, or Microsoft. I had dreams of contributing to something massive and being part of the next big tech innovation. But that dream quickly crumbled. I had a problem with focusing. I had always been a bit of a rebel, the type to question everything, and school felt more like a series of hoops to jump through rather than something that would help me build what I wanted. I wasn't getting the grades, and my heart wasn't in it anymore. I had an idea for a tech startup that was so clearly the next big thing in my mind, and I figured I could learn more about business and coding through actual experience than by sitting in classrooms listening to professors talk about outdated tech trends. So, I made the decision to drop out. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. My parents were furious. They had put in a lot of money for me to attend college, and dropping out was seen as throwing it all away. I could understand their disappointment, but I knew deep down that I had to pursue what I thought was my true path. I didn't have a backup plan. I was broke, living in a tiny apartment with roommates, and feeling pretty lost, but I was determined to make it work. I began coding day and night, spending hours on Stack Overflow, watching tutorials on YouTube, and reading books. I taught myself how to build websites, mobile apps, and eventually, I became pretty good at it. But coding wasn't enough. I also had to learn about running a business, marketing, and customer service. That's where the real grind started. I figured the best way to get started was to build a product that I could sell. So I created a web application that allowed small businesses to manage their social media presence. I didn't have any clients, but I was confident that there was a market for it. The only problem? I didn't know how to sell it. I spent a few months creating a product that I thought was groundbreaking, but when I finally launched, nothing happened. No customers, no interest. I tried cold emailing businesses, sending them free trials of my software, but nothing seemed to work. I was getting discouraged, questioning if this was the right path for me. One day, I stumbled across a Reddit thread that mentioned something about the lean startup method. It was a game changer. The idea behind it was simple: build a minimum viable product, MVP, and get feedback from real users before going all in. Up until that point, I had spent months creating a perfect product in my head, but I hadn't considered what the market actually wanted. So, I went back to the drawing board. I cut down my app to its core functionality and launched a very basic version of it. The design was terrible, and the features were limited, but it worked. I put it out there, offering it for free for a limited time in exchange for feedback. To my surprise, businesses started using it. The feedback rolled in, and I quickly realized that my original idea had missed the mark. What I learned from that failure was invaluable. I had thought I was solving one problem, but the users had different pain points altogether. I made a list of all the feedback, went back to work, and improved the product. I didn't get rich overnight, but slowly, customers started to trickle in. I began charging for my app, and to my amazement, some businesses were willing to pay for it. But even with some early customers, I wasn't making enough to live on. I had to get creative. I started reaching out to influencers and bloggers who covered tech products, offering them free access in exchange for reviews. I also started experimenting with paid ads, targeting small business owners who might find my product helpful. I didn't have much money for marketing, so I had to be very strategic with how I spent it. By 2017, my business was slowly growing. I had a handful of paying customers, but still, I was barely scraping by. I was working 12 to 14-hour days, coding, answering support emails, and constantly hustling to get more people to sign up. It was exhausting, but I could see the potential. The turning point came when I managed to land a partnership with a small business consulting firm. They started recommending my app to their clients, and that gave me the legitimacy I needed to start growing faster. With the newfound success, I hired my first employee, a talented designer who helped overhaul the look of the app. That's when the business started feeling real. We expanded the product, added more features, and began scaling. By 2019, I had a team of 5, and we were making enough money to pay ourselves comfortably. But no success story comes without its hurdles. In 2020, the pandemic hit. At first, I was terrified. My customers were small businesses, and many of them were struggling. I feared my product would be irrelevant in a time of crisis. But then I realized that my app could actually help businesses stay connected with customers and manage their online presence during lockdowns. We pivoted, offering more affordable plans, and within a few months, we saw a huge surge in signups. It was a rough year for everyone, but in hindsight, it was also the year that my business truly took off. In 2021, I hired more people, started expanding internationally, and really honed in on customer success. The revenue tripled, and by 2022, I felt like I was living the dream. I finally felt like I was doing what I was meant to do. Now, in 2025, my business is worth millions, and I've sold a portion of it to a larger company. But I've never forgotten where I came from. I still take the time to answer support emails, even if I'm no longer in the weeds as I once was. The hardest moments of my life, being broke, working for months with no results, and losing confidence, were the ones that taught me the most. So here I am, running a business that I'm proud of, having gone through failure after failure, and still learning every day. If there's one thing I can say for sure, it's this: if you're willing to put in the work and not quit when it feels impossible, success will find you in ways you never expected. It's been a wild ride. There's still a long way to go, but I'm finally living a life I couldn't have even imagined back when I dropped out of college. The key to entrepreneurship, I've learned, is not giving up, even when it feels like the odds are against you. If I can do it, so can you. I remember when I first started my business, it wasn't a big leap or grand idea that propelled me forward. It was more like a tiny spark in the middle of a personal storm. I didn't know it at the time, but that little spark would turn into something bigger than I could have imagined. Let me take you back to where it all began. It's 2016, and I'm sitting in a cubicle at a job I hated. I was working at a mid-sized marketing agency in a city that didn't exactly scream entrepreneurial hub. My job was mind-numbing. I was constantly doing the same repetitive tasks, handling client spreadsheets, scheduling meetings, sending out emails, nothing that would make anyone feel fulfilled. One day, I walked into the office early, coffee in hand, and sat down in front of my computer. I remember looking out the window and feeling an overwhelming sense of dissatisfaction with my life. I had graduated college a few years prior, found a job that paid my bills, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what I actually wanted to do. I wasn't passionate about marketing, and the corporate world was starting to feel like a dead end. But I didn't want to just quit without a plan, so I began to dream a little. I spent the next few weeks reflecting on what I could do, something that would make me feel like I was in control of my future. I spent hours brainstorming. What skills did I have? What industries fascinated me? After a lot of trial and error, one idea stuck: e-commerce. At first, it felt like a pipe dream. I was working 9 to 5, living paycheck to paycheck, and had no savings to speak of. How was I going to fund an e-commerce venture with my meager salary? The thought of starting a business felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the vast unknown. But something inside me clicked. I was tired of just existing. I wanted to create something, to build a business that could change my life. So, I started researching. The first thing I did was look into dropshipping. It seemed like a way to get into the e-commerce game without having to invest in inventory up front, and that was critical since I couldn't afford to stock products. I spent every free minute I had reading articles, watching YouTube tutorials, and taking online courses. Slowly, the fog began to lift. I figured out how to set up a website, find suppliers, and drive traffic. At the time, I didn't have any real plan. I was just experimenting. I remember the first product I sold, a small, niche product I thought was cool and that had a somewhat decent demand, was a complete fluke. I had created a simple website on Shopify, set up a Facebook ad with a modest budget, and boom, a sale came through. I couldn't believe it. One sale. But it was a sale nonetheless, and that moment changed everything. The first few months were brutal. I was juggling my full-time job and trying to build my side hustle in the evenings. I'd wake up early to work on my store before heading to the office. Then, I'd come home, eat dinner, and work on it until midnight or later. Every moment was precious, and I started to feel the exhaustion weigh on me. But I didn't care. I was driven. I continued testing new products, refining my ads, and learning from my mistakes. The first 6 months were a mix of triumphs and failures. I had products that flopped, had campaigns that lost money, and suppliers who didn't deliver. But through it all, I stuck with it. I remember when I finally broke even, and then made my first real profit. It wasn't much, just a couple $100, but it felt like I had hit the jackpot. That was my turning point. I started scaling. I reinvested the money into better advertising, expanded my product offerings, and began to focus on building a brand. Around this time, I got the courage to quit my full-time job. It was a terrifying decision, but I knew it was the only way forward. By the end of 2017, my business was doing well enough that I could pay my rent and support myself. I moved into a small apartment and turned one room into my office. I remember feeling so proud of what I had accomplished, of how far I had come. But I also knew I couldn't stop there. The business needed to continue growing. I started to experiment with new marketing techniques, Instagram influencers, email marketing, content creation. I also hired a few freelancers to help me with graphic design, product photography, and customer support. As my business grew, so did my team. It was no longer just me running the show. By 2019, my e-commerce store had reached a point where it was generating consistent six-figure revenue. But here's the kicker. I realized I wasn't as happy as I thought I would be. I had all the financial freedom I could want, but I was working 12 to 14-hour days, burning myself out. I had built something successful, but it was taking a toll on me. That's when I took a step back and reevaluated my life and business. I had become so focused on growth and numbers that I forgot about the reason I started in the first place, to live a life I loved. I decided it was time to scale back, automate processes, and find a better work-life balance. So, I made some major changes. I hired a full-time operations manager to handle the day-to-day tasks, outsourced more work, and put systems in place to reduce my personal involvement in every little decision. I also made time for myself. I started exercising regularly, spending weekends with family and friends, and rediscovering hobbies that I had neglected for years. Now, here we are in 2025. The business is still thriving, but I'm no longer chained to my desk. I work a fraction of the hours I used to, and I've found a balance that allows me to live a fulfilling life. I've been able to travel the world, explore new opportunities, and give back to the community. Looking back on my journey, I realized that it wasn't just about building a business. It was about learning how to live with purpose and find meaning in my work. I've made mistakes, taken risks, and faced setbacks, but every step of the way, I've learned and grown. If there's one thing I could tell anyone who is thinking about starting their own business, it's this. It's not going to be easy, and there will be days when you want to quit. But if you have the passion and the perseverance to stick with it, you can turn that spark into something amazing. Just remember, it's not about how fast you can get there. It's about the journey and the person you become along the way. And trust me, if I can do it, so can you. I was always told that being an entrepreneur meant sacrificing everything. Your time, your sanity, your relationships. But no one ever told me how much of yourself you actually had to lose to build something that might even work. Looking back, it was almost like I had to become someone else to even make it happen. And I'll be honest with you, that someone was exhausted, frustrated, and at the edge of giving up countless times. But somehow I pushed through. This is the story of how I went from nothing to a successful online business in 5 years. It all started when I was in my late 20s. I had just gotten my degree in marketing, but I wasn't exactly thrilled with the direction my life was going. I was working a regular 9-to-5 job at a small agency in the city. It paid okay, but I was barely scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't mind the work, but I knew deep down that I was meant to do something bigger. I just wasn't sure what that was. I remember having a conversation with a friend one night after a few too many drinks. We were talking about how much we hated the corporate grind and how we felt like our potential was being wasted. He said something that stuck with me. You don't have to work for someone else to build something. It was like a light bulb went off. I couldn't just quit my job, of course, but I could start working on something on the side. That's when I started researching online business models. I knew I wanted something digital, something scalable, that didn't require a storefront or a ton of overhead. I stumbled upon e-commerce and dropshipping, and immediately, it clicked. I spent the next few weeks devouring every piece of information I could find. I read books, watched YouTube videos, and joined forums like Reddit to learn from others who were doing it. I had no idea what I was doing at first. The idea of importing cheap products from China and selling them online sounded simple, but I quickly learned it wasn't. There were countless pitfalls I didn't anticipate: customer service nightmares, shipping delays, and of course, trying to stand out in a saturated market. But even after all the setbacks, I kept going. I remember spending nights researching suppliers, negotiating prices, and building my first online store. It was a mess. I didn't have the budget for a professional website, so I used Shopify's free template and just figured it out as I went. I had no design skills, no branding, no product photography, just a basic online store and a dream. I launched it, and almost immediately, nothing happened. No sales. Not a single order. I didn't give up, though. I realized I needed to market the store somehow. So, I started playing around with Facebook ads. I spent hours tweaking ad copy and targeting different groups, trying to figure out what would click. After weeks of failure, I finally got my first sale. It wasn't much, but it was a huge moment. I remember jumping up from my desk and fist-pumping the air. I knew this was just the beginning. But the next few months were brutal. My sales were inconsistent, and I was losing money on ads more often than I was making it. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't close to quitting several times. There were nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. trying to fix broken links or track down missing inventory. And on top of that, I still had my day job, which meant barely any sleep and feeling completely drained. One of the most challenging parts was dealing with customer complaints. People wanted refunds, complained about slow shipping, and left bad reviews. It stung every time. It felt like the universe was telling me to stop, but for some reason, I just couldn't. I was in too deep. I spent hours improving my customer service process, working with suppliers to speed up shipping, and coming up with better product descriptions and images. Slowly but surely, the results started to show. My revenue went up, and my store started to gain some traction. As my business grew, I realized I couldn't do it alone anymore. I needed help. I hired my first virtual assistant to handle customer service and order fulfillment. That was a game changer. I could finally focus on scaling the business. I reinvested every penny I made back into advertising and improving my website. I hired a designer to revamp my store and a photographer to take high-quality product photos. I also started building an email list and offering promotions to keep customers coming back. By year 2, things were starting to look up. My sales were consistent, and I had built a solid customer base. I decided to take the plunge and quit my day job. It was terrifying, but I had a plan in place. I knew I needed to go all in if I wanted to make this work. The first few months of full-time entrepreneurship were a whirlwind. I spent all my time optimizing my website, testing new products, and diving into more advanced marketing strategies like Instagram influencers and Google Ads. It wasn't easy, but I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. By the end of year 3, my business was bringing in 6 figures a year. It was still a grind, but I had the freedom to work on my own terms. I started taking better care of myself. I set boundaries with my time and made sure to take breaks when needed. I also hired a small team to help me with content creation and social media management. This gave me more time to focus on strategy and growth. By year 4, I had expanded into other markets. I had a full-fledged online brand with multiple product lines and a loyal customer following. My revenue was climbing faster than I ever imagined, and I finally felt like I had achieved something. But that success didn't come without its sacrifices. I lost friends along the way. My relationship with my family became strained because I was always working. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was so consumed by my business that I neglected everything else. Looking back now, I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't just about building a business. It's about balancing all aspects of life. It's about learning from failures, constantly adapting, and understanding that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes years of hard work, sacrifice, and yes, some serious sleepless nights. But it's also about finding what truly makes you happy, even if it means making some difficult choices along the way. Today, I'm at a place where I can look at my business and know that all the pain, the late nights, the self-doubt, and the failures were worth it. It's still a lot of work, but now I have the freedom to work from anywhere in the world, and I'm able to do things on my terms. I've built something that I'm proud of, and I wouldn't change a thing about the journey. So, to anyone who's considering taking the plunge into entrepreneurship, know that it's not easy. It will test you in ways you can't even imagine. But if you're willing to put in the work and push through the hardest moments, you'll come out stronger on the other side. The road isn't straight, but the destination is worth it. Just remember, don't lose yourself in the process. Find a way to keep your sanity, your health, and your relationships intact. That's the real success. I'm an entrepreneur who built a 6-figure business in 3 years. Here's the roller coaster ride. Buckle up. I've always been the type of person to think outside the box, but I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. Growing up, I was told I'd either be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. There wasn't a ton of flexibility in my career options, at least according to my family. But I've always been a little rebellious when it comes to traditional paths. I was the kid who used to sell candy in school and organize parties, thinking of ways to make a little extra cash. Even though I went the safe route and graduated with a degree in marketing, deep down I had this nagging urge to build something of my own. The turning point came in my late 20s. I was working a 9-to-5 marketing job at a tech company, and on paper, I had everything: great pay, solid benefits, and even a company car. But I was miserable. I'd spend hours doing work that didn't light me up, sitting in meetings that drained me, and watching time slip away. After years of feeling this way, I decided to finally take the plunge and quit. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew I couldn't keep living this way. So, I left the job and started a business with just $5,000 in savings. The business was a digital marketing agency. At the time, I didn't think I'd end up in that field. Honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. All I had was a decent understanding of marketing and an absolute willingness to learn. The first few months were brutal. I didn't have any clients, and I was hustling hard, doing everything from building websites to cold calling local businesses. I could barely afford my rent, and every day felt like a massive gamble. I was living off ramen noodles and trying to get my name out there. Networking was my first and most important step. I spent countless hours at local meetups, talking to people, offering free consultations, and basically begging people to let me help them with their marketing. It was a rough start, but things began to shift slowly. The first big break came when I landed a local real estate company as a client. They wanted to revamp their digital presence, and I delivered more than what they expected. They were thrilled with the results, and they referred me to other businesses in their network. That was when the snowball effect began. I'll be honest, the first year was filled with long hours, burnout, and self-doubt. I often wondered if I had made a huge mistake, but I kept pushing through. I wasn't making a ton of money yet, but I was learning the ropes of running a business, how to manage clients, set up systems, hire freelancers, and keep everything running smoothly. I spent every penny I earned back into the business, investing in courses, marketing tools, and software to improve the quality of my services. Looking back, I'm convinced that reinvesting every dollar into the business was one of the smartest things I did. By the second year, I had a small team, 2 full-time employees and a handful of freelancers, and we were working with clients across different industries. This is when things started to pick up. Our reputation started to grow, and I began charging higher rates. However, I quickly realized that I was still working way too many hours, and I wasn't scaling fast enough. This was when I decided to try something different. Instead of offering traditional marketing services, I pivoted and started focusing on content creation, particularly video production. Video was the future of digital marketing, and I knew I could help businesses tell their stories through high-quality videos. I invested in better equipment, brought on a videographer, and revamped our offerings. I also started doing webinars and creating educational content around video marketing to build my personal brand. This move paid off big time. Our clients loved the new service, and we became known as the go-to agency for video content in our area. By the end of year 2, we had hit 6 figures in revenue, and I was starting to feel like I had finally gotten a grip on this entrepreneurship thing. But with success came new challenges. As the business grew, so did the complexity of running it. I had to figure out how to manage cash flow, hire the right people, and keep clients happy while scaling up. It wasn't easy, and there were many sleepless nights. I also realized that I couldn't do everything on my own, and I needed to trust my team more. Learning how to delegate was one of the most difficult but necessary lessons. The biggest turning point came in the 3rd year when I was invited to speak at a marketing conference. I was terrified. I had never spoken in front of a large crowd, but I knew it was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. That presentation changed everything. Not only did it lead to more high-ticket clients, but it also built my reputation as an expert in the field. People started reaching out to me for advice, and that's when I realized I could offer coaching and consulting as another revenue stream. At that point, the business was doing well, but I wasn't content to just stay where I was. I began to expand our service offerings, adding SEO and paid advertising to our portfolio. We also started offering services to clients internationally, which significantly increased our revenue. I finally felt like I had figured out the formula for building a successful business, but I'll be honest, there were still days when I questioned myself. The fear of failure never truly goes away, but I learned to embrace it and use it as motivation. As of today, 3 years after starting my business, I'm proud to say that it's a 6-figure company with a small, dedicated team. We're consistently booked out, working with some fantastic clients, and growing every month. I finally built a life I love, and it feels amazing to be my own boss. That said, I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't as glamorous as people think. It's messy, exhausting, and there are always highs and lows. But it's also incredibly rewarding. I wouldn't trade the journey for anything. If there's one thing I tell anyone thinking of starting their own business, it's this: it will be hard. You will doubt yourself. You will want to give up at times. But if you keep learning, stay persistent, and surround yourself with the right people, you'll get there. Just keep going. And remember, it's not about working harder. It's about working smarter and believing in yourself when the road gets tough. This journey has been my own, but I know there's no one-size-fits-all path. What works for one person might not work for another. But if I could do it with minimal resources, self-doubt, and no formal training, then so can you. You just have to be willing to start and to learn from your mistakes along the way. I've always been the kind of person who liked to tinker. Ever since I was a kid, I would pull apart anything I could get my hands on: radios, clocks, remote controls, just to see how they worked. I didn't have a lot of money growing up, and my family wasn't exactly rolling in cash. But I was always curious, always looking for new ways to fix things or make them better. Little did I know that curiosity would eventually lead to my first real entrepreneurial venture. It all started back in 2017, just after I graduated college with a degree in business. I had a decent job lined up at a marketing agency, but I was feeling restless. I've been thinking a lot about the idea of starting my own business. I didn't have any grand plans or a revolutionary product in mind, but I had one thing going for me. I was determined. One day, I was at home playing around with an old laptop that had been collecting dust. It was barely functional, slow, full of malware. The screen flickered, but I couldn't bear to toss it out. I'd always been a sucker for old tech. I thought, what if I could fix this? Not just fix it, but make it like new again. I spent the next few days researching how to upgrade its hardware, replace the screen, and clean up the software. After hours of work, the laptop was running better than it ever had before. The idea struck me. There had to be a market for this. People are always throwing out old electronics because they think they're beyond repair. What if I could fix them and sell them at a fraction of the cost of a new one? I didn't have much to invest, just a couple $100 I'd saved up, but I decided to go for it. I set up a simple website, bought a few tools, and started sourcing broken laptops from local classifieds and online marketplaces. My plan was simple: buy damaged electronics, refurbish them, and sell them at a profit. At first, it was slow. I made a few sales here and there, but it wasn't enough to sustain a business. I spent most of my time working on the side, but every free moment I had went into researching better ways to fix electronics. I watched tutorials, read up on components, and reached out to other tech enthusiasts online to learn as much as I could. Slowly but surely, my skills improved, and so did my sales. One day, I managed to get my hands on a batch of laptops from a local school district that was upgrading their computer labs. They were in bad shape, some didn't even power on, but I saw potential. I managed to get them for a steal. It took me a few weeks to fix them up, but when I listed them online, they sold like hotcakes. I started getting more confident and realized that I had a real opportunity here. The turning point came when I was approached by a small business owner who needed help with some office computers. She had several machines that were outdated and needed repairs. She asked if I could fix them at a reasonable price. I agreed, and once I finished, I took a leap and pitched her the idea of offering refurbished computers to her employees at a discount. She loved the idea and placed an order for 10 computers right then and there. That was the moment when things started to take off. Word of mouth spread, and soon, I was getting calls from all kinds of businesses, schools, small offices, even individuals. My little operation went from a hobby to something that actually resembled a business. By 2019, I had enough demand to quit my marketing job and focus on my venture full-time. I moved into a small workshop, hired a couple of part-time employees, and started expanding my product offerings. I didn't just focus on laptops anymore. I began offering refurbished desktops, phones, and even gaming consoles. I built partnerships with suppliers of replacement parts and started getting bulk orders for specific models. My website was now attracting customers from all over the country, and it was clear that I was onto something. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were plenty of setbacks along the way. For one, I realized that keeping a consistent inventory was a huge challenge. Sometimes, I'd get a batch of laptops that looked perfect at first, but after disassembling them, I'd find damaged internal components. Or sometimes, parts would be delayed, and it would push back my entire production schedule. In addition, there were some issues with customer service. One particularly bad experience involved a customer who received a laptop with a defective screen. They were unhappy and demanded a full refund, which I was willing to do, but the transaction ended up in a dispute with my payment processor. I had to spend hours on the phone with them, explaining the situation and providing proof that I'd tried to resolve the issue. After that, I implemented a more thorough testing and return process, but it was a reminder that running a business wasn't just about making the sale, it was about building trust. The biggest lesson I learned, though, was the importance of scalability. Once I started getting more orders than I could handle, I realized I couldn't keep doing everything on my own. I had to hire more people, but finding good employees who understood the value of quality refurbishment was a challenge. I spent a lot of time training my team, ensuring they had the same attention to detail that I did. By 2020, my business had grown to the point where I was bringing in enough revenue to start thinking about expansion. I moved into a larger facility, upgraded my equipment, and even started offering warranties on the products I sold. I had a team of 10 employees, and we were refurbishing hundreds of devices every month. I also began to look into creating my own brand of refurbished electronics, focusing on eco-friendly products. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about building a brand that people trusted. I wanted to make a real impact on reducing e-waste and showing that refurbished electronics could be just as good, if not better, than new ones. It wasn't easy, but it was rewarding. Fast forward to 2023, and I'm proud to say that my business has turned into something I never thought possible. We've sold over 20,000 refurbished devices, expanded into other tech services, and built a loyal customer base. I've even started offering repair services for customers who prefer to keep their original devices rather than buying refurbished ones. There have been plenty of bumps in the road, but looking back, I'm thankful for every mistake I made. They taught me the value of persistence, learning from failures, and staying true to your vision, even when it feels like it's never going to work out. I'm not where I thought I'd be when I started, but I'm where I'm supposed to be. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: don't be afraid to start small. Tinker, learn, and build your skills. The road will be tough, but if you're passionate and willing to put in the work, the results will follow. It's not always glamorous, and sometimes it feels like you're spinning your wheels. But trust me, it'll be worth it. I grew up in a small town where opportunities were scarce. The local economy was driven by a few big industries, all of which were starting to fade away, one by one. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't exactly rich either. My dad worked at the local factory, and my mom was a teacher. While they provided for us, I knew they didn't have much more to give beyond that. I always dreamed of something bigger, something beyond the limitations of my hometown. I've always been the curious type, constantly looking for ways to improve things, and I've always had an interest in tech. In high school, I was the go-to guy for fixing computers. If a classmate's PC froze, I was the one they called. Eventually, I started building computers for people, which was something I genuinely enjoyed. It wasn't exactly profitable, but it helped me get a taste of entrepreneurship. Still, I had no idea what I was doing in terms of running a business. It was just a hobby. When I graduated, I had a decision to make. I could either go to college, which my parents were pushing for, or take a chance and start a business. My parents were the traditional type. They wanted me to go to university, get a degree, and get a real job, as they put it. But for some reason, I felt that the path they suggested wasn't for me. I didn't know exactly how I was going to make it, but I had this overwhelming sense that I could create something on my own. With a few $1,000s saved up from my computer gigs, I decided to take the plunge. I rented a small office space in the downtown area of my town, one of those rundown buildings with peeling paint and broken windows. It was cheap, and I figured I could make it work. I used my savings to buy some second-hand computers and started offering tech repair services, web design, and network support. I didn't expect to become a millionaire overnight. In fact, I just wanted to cover my rent and pay for groceries. The first few months were brutal. I spent more time working in the office than I did at home. Most days, I was in that tiny office from sunrise to sunset, trying to get anyone who needed tech help to walk through my door. The first customer I got was a local restaurant owner who needed help fixing a broken POS, point of sale system. I remember feeling so nervous when I spoke to him on the phone. He was an older guy, and I could tell he didn't trust me at first. But after a couple of hours of work, I managed to fix the system, and he was impressed. He even gave me a tip, something I didn't expect at all. That was the first time I realized that people would pay for my expertise. It was the first taste of success. Word of mouth started spreading. I began getting more clients, small businesses needing help with tech, websites, and networks. Slowly but surely, I started building a reputation. By the end of the first year, I had managed to hire one employee, a guy named Tom, who was just as passionate about tech as I was. We started expanding our services to include cloud computing and cybersecurity, and that's when things really began to take off. There was a demand for tech services in the area that no one was addressing, and we filled that gap. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Around the second year of running the business, I faced one of my biggest challenges. My biggest client, a chain of local retail stores, suddenly went under. Their bankruptcy left us with a huge gap in revenue that we hadn't anticipated. I remember sitting in my office, staring at my balance sheets, thinking I might have made a huge mistake. I had employees to pay, rent to cover, and the business was teetering on the edge of failure. For weeks, I was barely sleeping, constantly worrying about how to keep everything afloat. The turning point came when I realized that I had to diversify. I couldn't rely on just one or two big clients anymore. I started targeting a broader range of customers, individuals, families, and small businesses. I invested in digital marketing, which at the time was still in its early stages, and I worked on building a strong online presence. I created a website, optimized it for search engines, and started running Google ads. The results were slow at first, but eventually it started paying off. New clients started calling, and slowly, our revenue began to climb again. Around year 4, things started to stabilize. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. I had a small team working for me, and the work was coming in consistently. At that point, I started to dream bigger. I wanted to expand beyond the local area, and I knew that the internet was the key. I created an e-commerce platform where customers could buy computer parts, software, and other tech products. The idea was simple: provide high-quality products with fast shipping and excellent customer support. But there were already plenty of competitors doing the same thing, so I needed a unique angle. That's when I decided to focus on customer service. I made it my mission to provide support that was far above the industry standard. I spent hours on the phone with customers, helping them troubleshoot issues, answering questions, and offering advice on tech products. Over time, that commitment to customer service began to pay off. We started receiving glowing reviews, and word of mouth spread like wildfire. By year 6, my small business had become a full-fledged operation with a few hundred employees. We were making millions in revenue, and I had expanded to multiple locations across the country. What started as a small office in a rundown building was now a company with a modern headquarters and a thriving online store. I had gone from that nervous young entrepreneur struggling to keep the lights on to the CEO of a growing tech company. But success didn't come without sacrifices. There were long nights, moments of doubt, and plenty of times when I thought I was in over my head. I lost friends along the way and made mistakes that cost me money. But the key to my success, I think, was persistence and the willingness to adapt. When something didn't work, I didn't give up. I tweaked, adjusted, and tried again. Today, I'm in a very different place. The company has continued to grow, and I've moved on to new ventures. I still think back to those early days when I was struggling to make ends meet, and I'm proud of how far I've come. But I never forget where I started, and I always try to remind myself that no matter how much success I achieve, there's always room to learn and grow. I guess the moral of the story is that entrepreneurship isn't easy. It's not about having a great idea and waiting for the money to roll in. It's about hard work, persistence, and the ability to adapt. You will face setbacks. You will question whether it's worth it. But if you stick with it and stay true to your vision, you might just find that success is closer than you think. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.